Or are we up?
Don't worry about it, we're professionals.
Somewhat.
Got it.
We
Okay,
did.
we're done.
On that note, let's get started. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:06 PM. Madam Clerk, can you please call a roll?
Commissioner Ledoux,
Here.
Vice Chair Madrid,
Here.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner White,
Here.
and Chair Diedrich.
Here. No presentations tonight. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Are there any
Chair?
Oh, yes.
We skipped over item 3.
Thank you. One of arguably the most important part of tonight. Thank you for catching that. Travis, do you want to lead us tonight in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you don't mind?
Please stand, put your hand over your heart.
Oh, boy.
Let's begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Could have been anti-American.
Yes, that was not a statement of mine by accidentally skipping that. I apologize, but thank you, Travis. Now we'll move on to the agenda. Are there any modifications to the agenda tonight?
There are no modifications, but I just wanted to note that due to posting requirements, the public hearing item will be continued to October 13th at Planning Commission, and you guys will vote on that during that item.
Thank you. Can I get approval of the agenda with that, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item number 6, public comments. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak tonight?
I do not have any requests.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Can I please get approval of the August 25th, 2021 minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
No items on the consent calendar tonight. Moving on to public hearing items, which we just discussed. In light of the failure of the lack of proper noticing, can I get a motion and a second to continue the item to the October 13th, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
And are we doing an oral vote or? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now moving on to item 10.1. Madam Community Development Director, can you please introduce this item?
Sure. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This evening, we have a presentation for a city-led project out of our Advanced Planning Division to develop objective design standards. I'm going to introduce Senior Planner Doug Darnell, who will also be introducing our consultant with PlaceWorks.
Thank you, Cheryl, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm pleased to introduce this item, which is a workshop, Planning Commission workshop on City of Menifee multifamily residential or multifamily objective design standards. And this is to provide the Commission an opportunity to review and provide input on the objective standards prior to hearings and approval of and adoption. And these are essentially intended to, these have been prepared to comply with, these have been prepared to comply with various state legislation, particular SB 35 and SB 330, which essentially is intended to increase housing production in the state and to address housing shortfall. All cities within California are faced with compliance with this legislation and adopting tools like the objective standards to help implement them. And in doing so, the city has consulted with PlaceWorks, and PlaceWorks is a consultant who's prepared the draft design standards, and this was funded through HCD and their SB2 Planning Grant Program. So with that, this evening, we have Sheila Sertival with PlaceWorks, the consultant who's prepared the draft standards. And with that, I'd now like to ask Sheila to present the guidelines to the commission. Thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome. Good evening, Planning Commission members. By the way, my name is pronounced Sheila Cedarvall. You were very close.
Oh,
So I welcome this opportunity to present this draft form of the guidelines, where we've enjoyed working with the city staff very much over the past several months, and we look forward to hearing your input, and thank you for reviewing the document. As Doug mentioned, this document was put together solely to fulfill state legislation requirements, particularly SB 35 and SB 330. And this requires a simplified administrative review for projects meeting certain applicability requirements. And the document has been set up to be a review checklist so that when an applicant comes in, the requirements can be checked off. And that way, it's very clear and objective whether or not they meet all of the requirements. So the document will set a minimum standard of quality, and also it has a CEQA exemption. And again, it's an administrative review, so it would not go through Planning Commission and City Council when a project comes in. So applicability, there are very strict requirements for which projects would apply for these objective standards. So the project has to be multifamily infill under the SB 35 definition. 10% of the units must be affordable to households at or below 80% of the area median income, AMI. And also they cannot be within farmland, wetlands, very high fire hazard zones, earthquake fault zones, a special flood area, a protected habitat, or a conservation easement. So I know that there were just recently multifamily guidelines that were approved by the city. So we did use those guidelines when we formulated these standards. And there are a few differences between the two documents. And one of them is that this document includes all the shall statements from the design guidelines. It does not include the should statements that are more subjective. So because the state requires that all the requirements be very objective. And we also included the applicable general plan policies from the community design elements. And those are noted within the document in red after each requirement. And then we also, we wanted to create an authentic Menifee experience with projects that went through this process. So we selected about 8 architectural styles actually, but we went through the process. Those were individual styles were selected, so it was narrowed down to 6. So those styles include both fixed and flexible elements. Some of the pages have a list where certain elements can be chosen. And this is a new requirement that the design guidelines did not include. So the 6 styles that were selected are Spanish colonial, craftsman, American traditional, farmhouse contemporary, Tuscan, and modern. And again, we went through the developer stakeholder group for outreach, and they gave us input on which styles would be selected, and that's how we arrived at these 6 styles. And overall, the group was in support of the approach, and there was concern about keeping the architecture authentic to Menifee Town Center and existing neighborhoods within the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug, and he's going to go over the next steps.
Thank you, Sheila. So after we have a discussion here tonight and we get the commission's input, what we'll do from there is look at any revisions we may need to make to the guide to the standards based on the input. Along with the standards, we would be proposing a zoning code amendment. Essentially, that amendment would facilitate the incorporation of the design guidelines as a sort of an appendix to the zoning code and incorporate the standards by reference into the code. So whatever we need to do to finalize it, after that, we would notice for public hearings, come back to the Planning Commission with our recommendation, and then City Council for adoption. So this concludes staff's presentation. I think, oh, bear with me. Move to the next slide here. So with that, our recommendation is that the commission review the presentation, discuss and provide input on the draft multifamily objective design standards. So we're prepared to answer any questions and give it to the commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate that. Commissioners, anybody have questions for the staff? Chris?
So my understanding is there's certain criteria that this applies to, not just any multifamily. Is it mainly infill, is my understanding?
Yes, that's correct. There are certain requirements for infill also. 75% of the perimeter must be adjacent to urban areas, developed areas.
Developed areas, okay. And, you know, with CEQA, there's traffic standards, noise, air quality, all those different standards that can trigger, if it's small enough, it's a negative mitigated. If it's larger, you have to do mitigating factors and such. How can they get away with absolutely no CEQA, with a CEQA exemption here? What if it's a 500 unit apartment building? You've got traffic, you've got noise, you've got all kinds of standards, you know, normal CEQA issues that have to be dealt with. They're just saying basically forget it and just get an exemption.
Yes, the intent is to encourage development of housing, and especially affordable housing.
So it's basically a free ride on all those issues then.
As I understand it, would the staff like to?
You know, I wouldn't say a free ride on all CEQA issues. You know, there's definitely somewhat of a sizable list of criteria that a site would need to meet in order to qualify for this this streamlined review, this ministerial process. And some of those things, bear with me here, but you know, they
And while you're researching that,
Sure.
my understanding is it's not the city who's doing this, it's the AB 35 that's setting the standard saying CEQA is exempt.
exactly.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
but is that checklist, does any of them have an attempt to affect for these factors that need to be mitigated for? The traffic, the noise, the pollution, such and such?
Yeah, I think you know, the project, just looking at our eligibility requirement checklist that we have here, you know, first of all, 10% of the units, currently for the city, 10% of the units would have to be affordable to households and making below 80% of the area median income. It'd have to be infill development. And, you know, 75% of the perimeter of the site adjoining parcels currently or formerly developed with urban uses. You know, it could not have a variance associated with it. You know, it would have to meet all of the standards. And it would, you know, it couldn't be in a coastal zone. It's not applicable here. Cannot be prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance. Wetlands, earthquake fault zones, cannot be an area of high fire hazard severity, and a whole list of things. So generally, I think it's going to be maybe difficult for a lot of projects to meet every single one of those criteria. Pardon me.
So what about things like building height? Does the minimum, the maximum height standard still apply in the city? They can't put a 6-story up or anything like that?
Correct. So the existing zoning regulations would still apply. If I may, so the state adopted this legislation really to streamline and facilitate additional housing units, right? And to establish an objective process which limits local jurisdiction's ability to deny a housing project for issues that aren't objective, right? So if we create standards, we have our zoning standards, we have our density, we have our, FAR, we have our building height, we have our setbacks. Those are objective, right? It's a 5-foot minimum. You can check a box and say yes. When we're looking at residential architecture, or we say things in a guideline that it should be compatible with the adjacent area. That's not objective. That leaves things open to subjectivity, and the state in this piece of legislation and others that have been adopted or are pending want to eliminate that gray area. So as part of that, they have created a CEQA exemption for projects that, fit that box, if you will.
And it's my understanding that there are, at least at this point in time, not many parcels that would possibly be used for this, correct, in the city?
We haven't done a complete analysis of what properties this would, that projects could be eligible, but knowing that, it needs to be an infill site, there needs to be 10% minimum affordable, just looking at where we have a lot of vacant land, that wouldn't fit the infill definition.
Okay, and then on the design standards, we had the 6 design cities, the modern.
The architectural styles.
Those can be changed over time if we wish. Say in 10 years, we see the market is changing as far as what their designs are. We can do that, right? And just
Correct.
repost it.
Correct. There are standards if we wanted to update them at some point in the future. When we started this process, like Sheila mentioned, we started with 8 options and went to the developer stakeholder group and said, okay, these are what we think are the most common architectural styles proposed in the region relatively. Which ones make the most sense for development in Menifee? And so we narrowed it down to those 6, and we feel that the 6 options give enough design flexibility in which a project that perhaps was adjacent to Menifee Town Center that has more Spanish architectural themes would be better there. Or, it gives us a variety.
Okay.
And if you'd like, we can have IT put those styles back.
I like them all. I'm just saying that I know market desire changes over time, so
Right.
I want to make sure we were flexible to be able to update the standards. So.
And I,
Commissioner Thomas, if I may just add one more thing. In addition, obviously, projects would still be required to pay impact fees.
Okay.
Therefore, if let's say there's some circulation improvements that would be required, city would have the ability to use those fees and perhaps improve circulation issues that may exist around the project. So we wish to have the ability to do that as well.
And wonderful. And so the density still doesn't, they still must comply with the density of the zoning and land use that is in existence, right? So if it has a 2.5 DU per acre, they have to go with that. Okay. Okay,
Correct.
that's all.
Cheryl, I had one question following up to what you said. You were talking about the 6 different styles and where, they might be fitting more to the surrounding, but they're not required to do that, right? They could choose any of the 6, right? So they could choose modern next to Spanish or whatever, right? And staff would have to still approve it in that case, right? Okay, thank you. Other questions for staff?
Yeah, I do. Doug, could you put that last slide up again, the very last one? It was the recommendation slide?
Oh, here we go.
This one?
No, the one on what we're going to accomplish tonight, what we're going to vote on.
Oh, okay.
So there's no formal action tonight. This is more a discussion and to receive feedback from the commission, and if there's anyone in the public that would like to provide input.
Okay.
Because ultimately, we will be back, we'll take whatever feedback we receive tonight, make revisions and incorporate that feedback into the document, and then notice for a public hearing for recommendation to city council ultimately.
So I hear language in there, like Sheila mentions objective, and then she associates that to a shall, opposed to a should. So that's going to come to planning and your interpretation?
No, there's no interpretation. A should is a maybe, could. A shall is you must. So we have to check the box. Did you do that or not?
Okay.
So my understanding is that as soon as we finish this, if a project comes to the city, we'll never see it, because it
Right.
will be administratively approved.
Correct.
That's correct, yes.
So you'll meet with the developer, you'll check the boxes.
Yeah,
And if it meets all the criteria, it'll get approved.
right.
That's correct.
Yeah, the idea of the law here is to, really remove the discretionary approval process, hearings and I think a lot of it is in reaction to maybe jurisdictions that have a history of denying projects or lowering density on projects, and so taking that discretionary out of it and aspect out of it and providing more certainty in the process, but at the same time, with these standards, we want to get, as quality a development as we can in an objective administrative process.
So every city will have to develop their own. And will every city's look like ours, not look like ours? How is it?
I think they'll all look a little bit different. I know our consultant has done this process with other cities in the local area. Some of the styles may be the same, but some other styles that we did not include in ours, other cities may have included in theirs.
Yes, that's correct. PlaceWorks has prepared ODS for cities of Wildomar and also Temecula, and their styles were different. Some of them did overlap. French was one of the styles that Wildomar embraced, which didn't work in Menifee. So modern was a new style that was introduced here that they didn't have in either Temecula or Wildomar. So,
Because typically when the legislation comes down, it's you shall do it, not how to do it. And so it's usually left up to the cities to figure out without direction from the state. Just do it however you need to do it. So, yeah, another one of those.
right, exactly, another one of those.
Any other questions for staff? No? Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this?
I do not have any requests.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, now we can open up to our comments and discussion on this. Who wants to go first?
And we've asked our questions, so I don't see what else.
No further input towards it? I think it was a great job going through. What you did was very thorough and very well done, so no one else has
Thank you.
anything else to add.
I look forward to seeing the document in its final review phase, just to see what it looks like. Right now, it's an abstract, and so I'd like to see the final version. So,
Thank you.
With that, I would like to thank staff and our consultants for their hard work on this. Great job, and we look
you.
forward to when it comes back for review at final.
All right, we look forward to present it again then. Thank you very much for your comments.
thank you.
Thank you. No formal action on that, so moving on. Madam Community Development Director, do we have any comments tonight?
I do. I have a couple things I wanted to share with the commission. I'll start with some updates on new business openings. We have Share Tea, Boba and Tea that opened just across the street next to Flame Broiler. Thank you. Dave's Hot Chicken on Newport in Town Center. They are getting close, and we anticipate them opening in mid-October.
Yeah, I have a question about that. I used to travel up north a lot, and there was a Dave's barbecue and something. It was big chain. Is this the same as that one? It's Anyone eating out of Dave's? No?
I don't think it's the same. Yeah, different
Okay.
than Famous Dave's. So I can send you more information on this Dave's if you'd like.
I drive by it every morning and I'm like, is that the same one? Because they were really good. The other one up north was really good.
Okay.
Supposed to be very good too.
Cheryl, did you say that the Share Tea opened already?
Yes,
I did
Share
not
Tea is
realize.
open.
Excellent.
And then the Centerpoint project on Newport, just west of Dave's Hot Chicken, is coming along very quickly. We anticipate the users in that center to open early November-ish. And then Crumble Cookie in Countryside Marketplace next to the breakfast house. They got their tenant improvement permits and are under construction, and we anticipate them opening end of October, early November as well. So lots of new businesses there. I also wanted to just inform the community and the commission that we are in the process of updating our community development block grant 5-year consolidated plan. Every 5 years, we develop a plan based on community outreach and input on, priorities in the community and how the CDBG federal funds should be allocated. So that plan will cover the 2022 to 2027 plan years. So right now, we're focused on our community outreach portion of this work effort. We have a survey on the city's website, and so we're encouraging residents to participate in that survey to help us identify priority areas and focus for the next consolidated plan. And then we also have a community meeting scheduled for October 14th at 6 p.m. at the Mott Museum. We'll also be looking at other opportunities for community input as we go through this process before the end of this fiscal year. And then October 21st, we have our State of the City event in the morning, 9 a.m. So those are my updates. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Seeing no questions, thank you, Cheryl. Fellow commissioners, anything to report on committee activities? No. Do you guys have your next meeting, speaking of CDBG?
Not to our knowledge.
No,
at
that's
this point.
late, that's later on, yeah. Okay, thank you. Does the commission have any future agenda items that they would like to request? No. All right, this might be our fastest meeting ever then. With that, I will adjourn at 6:34 p.m. Thank you.